The Romans are attacking! Their battleships are right outside the city. They've got floating siege towers and swords and spears and a huge army. We've got an elderly Greek inventor and a bunch of mirrors. The fools won't know what hit them. Activate the Deathray. Today, it's the story of Archimedes and his creation, the ancient Greek Deathray. Archimedes was an ancient Greek inventor and mathematician, something between an absent-minded professor like Doc Brown and a diabolical supervillain like Dr. Doom. Archimedes lived in about 200 BC in the city of Syracuse. At the time, Syracuse was a powerful city-state on the island of Sicily, which is the ball being kicked by the boot of Italy. Even in his own time, Archimedes was known as a famous genius. As a young man, he was known to have spent time in the Library of Alexandria, the world's greatest library, which burned down in 48 BC and took much of the ancient world's stored knowledge with it. Being that a scientist ran in the family, Archimedes' father was an astronomer, and the young man quickly became a well-respected scientist hired as a consultant on mathematical and engineering problems. Supposedly, Archimedes had a revelation about how to calculate the volume of objects while taking a bath, noticing that the water level rose when he got in the tub. He was so excited by this that he shouted "Eureka," which means "I've got it," while running through the streets in joy. And no, he didn't get dressed before he did this. He created new kinds of puzzles, discovered the concept of the center of gravity, and calculated the value of pi for kicks. The wacky inventor was annoyed by people saying that it was impossible to calculate the number of grains of sand on the beach, so he invented the metal-sounding beast number, a number so huge that if you tried to write it out in full, it'd be longer than the entire universe. Well, the people of Syracuse figured that if you've got a mad scientist in the neighborhood, you might as well use them. In Archimedes' lifetime, the Roman Republic was trying to take over the entire Mediterranean, a series of conflicts known as the Punic Wars. The island of Sicily was on their shopping list, which culminated in the siege of Syracuse. The Romans attacked the city for an entire year, and the city defended itself with weapons created by Archimedes. Archimedes used his inventive skill to construct a series of devices to defend his home. Among them, a gigantic battleship said to be the largest in the world at the time. He also created the awesomely named Claw of Archimedes, also known as the Ship Shaker, a huge grappling hook on a crane that would grab enemy ships and pull them right out of the water. Of course, in classic supervillain style, Archimedes was always working on his next scheme, bigger and more impressive than the last. His most famous invention is one that is so fantastic, people still say it must be a myth. An energy weapon that could destroy ships from a distance. A death ray. According to historians, Archimedes apparently burned the ships of the enemy by means of his science. One account says he used burning mirrors to cause wood to burst into flames from hundreds of feet away. The exact mechanism for how this worked is debated. A Greek writer named Anthemius says that Archimedes used a parabolic mirror to focus the rays of the hot Mediterranean sun onto a single point, causing a ship to ignite, the way mean kids burn ants with a magnifying glass. If this is how the weapon worked, it would have required precise angles and a buttload of mirrors, arranged perfectly to create the right effect. A series of highly polished bronze or copper shields could have been used for this. However, modern attempts to replicate this setup have never been able to generate enough heat quickly enough to make the parabolic mirror a viable weapon of war. After all, why set up a series of complex mirrors to slowly burn up a ship when you could just use a catapult to lob a bag of flaming garbage at them? A catapult might even be the truth behind the idea, as a mathematician of Archimedes' skill might have understood the science of trajectories so well they could create a lethally accurate barrage. It could also be there's something about Archimedes' setup that we don't understand to this day. Heck, maybe he had a satellite in orbit that shot lasers like the ones they tried to kill Tetsuo with. It's also been suggested that the burning mirrors is actually a euphemism for a steam-powered cannon, or that the mirror system was not meant to set ships on fire, but to blind and distract the crew. If that's the case, it's almost identical in effect to certain modern laser beam weapons developed by the military. Not to burn through things, but as non-lethal dazzlers. Whatever the truth, Archimedes definitely had some kind of super science voodoo he was using on the enemies of Syracuse. The famous Greek historian Plutarch describes how freaked out the enemy was by Archimedes' crazy weapons. The enemy soldiers, seeing that indefinite mischief overwhelmed them from no visible means, began to think they were fighting with the gods. Despite Archimedes' lasers and claw machines and stuff, the siege of Syracuse ended in the defeat of the Sicilians. The Romans were able to break the siege by scaling the walls under the cover of night. Interestingly, at night, a sun-reflecting mirror weapon would be useless. The Roman general in charge of the attack gave explicit orders that Archimedes was not to be harmed, probably because they wanted a mad scientist for themselves. However, according to legend, when a soldier arrived at the inventor's home, he was busy working on new calculations. Annoyed at the interruption, he told the guy to buzz off. The guy, being an armed soldier of an occupying army, instead killed Archimedes. It's also possible that he knew who Archimedes was, and was more than a little peeved at the guy who had set a bunch of his friends on fire. Whether the legend is true or not, Archimedes was killed at the siege of Syracuse, robbing the world of whatever other badass inventions he might have created in the future. Probably a weather machine or something.